Delete everything. Everything goes. Everything goes.
14-year-old Celeste Rivas.
Run away.
Last seen 2024.
On September 8, 2025.
The 14-year-old's dismembered body
Found in the trunk of a vehicle belonging to singer David.
A well-known singer arrested.
dismembering her body using chainsaws.
In the back of my mind, I killed you. It was something that I decided to do.
Right now, as you're watching this, more than a dozen employees inside the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's office are being called in, one by one, for recorded interviews. They're being asked, under oath, whether they looked at confidential case files they had no authorization to open. Files connected to one of the most closely watched murder cases in the entire country. The case against singer D4VD. This isn't old news. This is happening right now, while a critical courtroom hearing sits just days away. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why this matters, who's involved, and whether it's even possible that this leak investigation could end up derailing the trial itself. Before we get into it, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. We're covering this case in real time, all the way through the next hearing and beyond, so you don't miss anything. Before the leaked files, before any of the legal maneuvering we're about to walk through, there's a girl at the center of all of this who deserves to be remembered as more than just a case number. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She was 14 years old, from Lake Elsinore, California, a quiet inland city that before any of this, most people outside Southern California had probably never even heard of. She'd been reported as a runaway more than once, starting back in early 2024, the kind of pattern that, tragically, so often gets treated as routine by the very systems meant to protect kids like her. A missing report filed, a case opened, a case closed, a girl still out there, still unseen by the people who were supposed to be looking out for her. It wasn't routine, it was the beginning of the end of her life. And whatever legal drama unfolds from here on out, whatever headlines this case generates, it all started with her. The man now charged in her death is 21-year-old David Anthony Burke, known to millions worldwide by his stage name, D4VD. If you've spent any time on the internet in the last few years, you've probably heard his music, maybe without even realizing whose voice you were listening to. Prosecutors allege that Burke and Celeste first met when she was just 11 years old. 11, an age where most kids are still figuring out 5th or 6th grade homework, not becoming entangled with someone who would years later be accused of unthinkable things. Prosecutors say that by the time Celeste was 13, an 18-year-old Burke had allegedly begun sexually abusing her. That abuse, according to prosecutors, continued hidden from public view, while his music career quietly exploded around him. Song after song, stream after stream. Investigators believe that on April 22nd of 2025, Celeste and Burke had an argument, one where she allegedly threatened to go public, to expose what had been happening to her, to end his career before it could climb any higher. Prosecutors allege that just one day later, on April 23rd, Celeste was killed. They say Burke stabbed her, and then instead of calling for help, instead of trying in any way to save her life, he simply stood by and watched her bleed out. For months after that, nobody knew where she was. Her family didn't know. The public didn't know. Then in September of 2025, her remains were discovered, inside the trunk of a Tesla registered to Burke, abandoned at a tow yard in Hollywood. Prosecutors say that before her body was ever found, Burke purchased a deeply unsettling collection of tools: a shovel, 2 chainsaws, a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, even an inflatable pool, all allegedly delivered to his home under a fake name. They allege he used those chainsaws inside that very pool to dismember Celeste's body. And in perhaps the single most chilling detail in this entire case, that he amputated 2 of her fingers, her ring finger and her pinky, because her ring finger bore a tattoo of his name. Those fingers have never been recovered. Investigators also discovered what's been described as a so-called burn cage style incinerator at his property. Burke now faces first-degree murder with special circumstances, continuous sexual abuse of a child under the age of 14, and mutilation of human remains. He's pleaded not guilty to every charge and remains in custody without bail. That's the case in full, as prosecutors have laid it out. Now let's get into the file at the center of today's story, and why it's suddenly relevant again. For months after Celeste's remains were identified, one piece of evidence carried more weight than almost anything else in this case: the official autopsy report. LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division didn't want it released early. They asked the medical examiner's office to withhold it entirely, worried that early exposure of forensic details could taint the jury pool or compromise the prosecution's case long before it ever reached a courtroom. The medical examiner's office initially pushed back, citing insufficient jurisdiction to withhold the records on its own authority. That answer wasn't good enough for investigators, so in November, LAPD went to a judge and secured a formal court order, legally sealing the autopsy file. That seal held for months, all the way until this past April, when the report was finally officially released to the public, right after Burke's arrest and arraignment. The chief medical examiner said at the time he was grateful the findings could finally reach the family and the public, after so many months of waiting for answers. That's the official record. That's the file everyone now knows about. The one that confirms Celeste died from multiple penetrating injuries, ruled a homicide. But here's the problem, and it's the reason we're making this video. Long before that file was ever officially unsealed, some of what it contained was already circulating. While that file was still under a legal seal, months before its official release, disturbing details about Celeste's condition and cause of death started surfacing anyway, in media speculation and reporting. Details specific enough that they likely came from someone with direct, unauthorized access to that sealed investigation. Not from official channels, not from an approved release. Someone somewhere saw something they weren't supposed to see, and it appears that somebody talked. To be precise here, because this is the part of the story people tend to get wrong, no one has been publicly named, and no one has been formally accused of leaking anything to a specific reporter. What's actually confirmed is narrower than that, but still serious. Sealed information reached the public before it legally should have. Between what should have stayed sealed and what actually got out is exactly what Los Angeles County is trying to get to the bottom of right now. If you're following this closely, go ahead and drop a like on this video. It genuinely helps this channel keep digging into cases like this one in depth. This is the part of the story that's actually current, not settled history. The county's Department of Human Resources has begun formally notifying employees inside the medical examiner's office, more than a dozen so far. Investigators and office staff, people who would have had legitimate day-to-day access to sensitive case files just like this one. They're being ordered to sit for recorded interviews, under oath, to answer one very specific question. Did they view law enforcement investigation files without proper authorization? Notice how narrow that question actually is. It isn't simply, did you talk to a reporter? It's more foundational than that, and in some ways more damning. Did you even open a file you had no legitimate reason to open in the first place? Because if the answer to that is yes, whether or not that person ever spoke to a single journalist, they've already crossed a line. The medical examiner's office has declined to comment publicly on any of this, saying only that it does not discuss pending investigations. A familiar and unsurprising position for a government office facing internal scrutiny. The union representing many of these employees, the LA County Professional Peace Officers Association, has confirmed that some of its members did in fact receive these formal notices. But even they're staying tight-lipped on specifics, saying only that they expect the process to be handled fairly. So here's exactly where this stands as of this recording. An active internal investigation, no names released, no conclusions reached, and a medical examiner's office remaining almost entirely silent on the details. What we're left with is a confirmed fact, sitting right next to a wide-open question. The confirmed fact: sealed information got out before it legally should have. The open question: who let it out, and how? Here's the part of this story that deserves the most attention of all, because this isn't just an internal HR matter, quietly resolved behind closed doors. If it's eventually confirmed that government employees, people with official access tied directly to law enforcement, leaked sealed and confidential material about this case to the outside world, that becomes a serious legal problem, and not just for the county itself. Legal observers following this case closely have already pointed out the obvious, uncomfortable implication. A leak like this could hand Burke's defense team a powerful argument to use later in the process. that his right to a fair trial was compromised before it even properly began, that public opinion, media narratives, and potential future jury pools were shaped, at least in part, by information that should never have been public in the first place. Take a moment to really sit with what that means. A system built specifically to protect the integrity of this case, to make sure the process remained fair for everyone involved, prosecution and defense alike, may have become the very thing complicating it, not because of anything Burke's legal team did, but possibly because of decisions made by people inside the very office meant to safeguard the evidence being used against him. It's the kind of bitter irony that shows up again and again in high-profile cases just like this one. The harder a system tries to tightly control a narrative, seal a file, lock down access, restrict who can see what, the more chances there sometimes are for something somewhere to slip through the cracks. And once something like that slips out, there's no putting it back. And this investigation isn't unfolding in isolation. It's happening right as the criminal case itself approaches its next major turning point, a preliminary hearing, the point where a judge formally decides whether prosecutors have presented enough evidence for the case to proceed to a full trial, is set for July 21st. Judge Charlene Almeida is expected to preside, and the hearing is anticipated to run somewhere between 3 and 5 days, given the volume of evidence expected to be presented. At a recent status conference, both prosecutors and Burke's defense team told the court they were finally ready to move forward, with no further delays requested by either side. An additional defense attorney was formally approved to join the counsel table, suggesting Burke's legal team is expanding its resources as the hearing approaches. The judge also indicated that any objection to Burke being shackled during courtroom proceedings would need to be raised through a formal written motion before the hearing begins. Prosecutor Beth Silverman has said that Celeste's family is doing, in her words, as well as possible, under circumstances no family should ever have to endure. So two threads are converging at almost the exact same moment: a criminal case heading into a critical, long-awaited hearing, and a leak investigation that could end up shaping how that case, and any future trial, actually plays out. So let's actually answer the question in our title. Could this leak probe derail the trial? If the HR investigation concludes that unauthorized access did happen, and if Burke's defense successfully argues that access compromised his right to a fair trial, it could affect several things. Jury selection for one, since attorneys would likely need to screen more carefully for jurors influenced by early unauthorized reporting. Media coverage restrictions potentially, if the court decides further gag orders or restrictions are necessary. And even, in a worst-case scenario for prosecutors, arguments raised later on appeal. If Burke is convicted and his defense argues the pretrial process was fundamentally compromised, none of that is guaranteed. All of it remains speculative at this stage, and legal experts are generally cautious about how far a leak investigation like this actually goes in practice. Courts have tools to address tainted jury pools without throwing out an entire case, things like extensive jury screening, change of venue requests, or careful jury instructions. But it's exactly the kind of complication that can quietly reshape a high-profile case long after the initial headlines fade, adding delays, additional motions, and legal arguments that have nothing to do with the actual facts of what happened to Celeste. And it raises an uncomfortable question that goes beyond this one case. If the people trusted to guard sealed evidence can't be trusted to keep it sealed, how many other high-profile cases have quietly been shaped the same way without anyone ever finding out? So here's where all of this actually leaves us. Heading into the back half of this year, two separate processes are unfolding almost side by side. The criminal case against Burke himself, moving toward that July 21st preliminary hearing, where a judge will decide if there's enough evidence to send this case to trial. And a quieter but potentially just as consequential internal investigation into whether medical examiner employees improperly accessed and possibly leaked sealed information from that very case. These two threads may look separate on the surface, but legally, they could end up tangled together in ways that shape this case for years to come, long after this particular hearing wraps up. A 14-year-old girl is gone. A man sits in custody, days away from a hearing that could determine the next chapter of his life. And somewhere inside a government office, someone may have broken the very rules meant to protect the truth of what happened to her. We still don't know who. We still don't know if it will ultimately change anything inside that courtroom. But right now, in real time, Los Angeles County is trying to find out, and we'll be watching every step of it with you. If this case has kept you as glued to the headlines as it's kept us, let us know in the comments what you think really happened inside that medical examiner's office, and whether you think this leak probe actually has the power to derail this trial. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. We'll be covering this case all the way through the July 21st hearing and beyond. We'll see you in the next one.